cameras off if you would like that. All right, I think we're ready to go. Again, the chat box is available. I'll be putting some links in there so you can learn a little bit more about our wonderful speakers and the work that they're doing. I will share my screen for a little introduction. One moment. Slideshow, here's where I want to be. Okay, welcome everyone to Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. This is our third workshop in this 4-part series celebrating all things breastfeeding, chest feeding, celebrating traditional cultures and traditions that are uplifting and celebrating all things infant feeding. This week is our AAPI week, and we have an amazing panel of speakers who are going to be speaking to us. They come from the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition, which is a coalition under the overall umbrella organization of Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. We're so excited to have everyone here who's tuning in live, and folks who aren't able to tune in live but signed up and are watching at a later point. We're so excited to have you here as well. We have a land acknowledgement that our wonderful board member and on our planning team, Kim, is going to be sharing and reading with us.
Hello, everyone. I am Kim Welvert. I am an RN IBCLC with Centricare St. Cloud Hospital Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, as well as chair for the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. It is my privilege and honor to state our land acknowledgement. The Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition acknowledges that each person here is inhabiting land that has been the traditional home of Native Americans. This unceded land is home to over 10,000 lakes and the mighty river Ojibwe people call the Father of Waters and Dakota people call River of the Falls. This land has been home to many Native communities and is now home to 7 Ojibwe reservations and 4 Dakota tribal communities. These families have long known that breast milk is a baby's first medicine, and yet colonialism and historical violence has broken the tradition of breastfeeding for many Native families and communities. Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition is dedicated to partnering with Indigenous families and communities to reclaim and restore breastfeeding as the first food of choice for all babies.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing that. So this month, the month of August, is National Breastfeeding Chest Feeding Month, and the theme for 2022 is Together We Do Great Things. So all month long, and for the next almost 2 weeks of August, there will also be a lot of celebrations of breastfeeding and chest feeding. Recognized on a national level, this is week 3 is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Breastfeeding Week. And the theme on this national level is telling our own stories and elevating our voices. And so we were so excited to have our panel of speakers here today be able to do a more local focused, Minnesota focused presentation for us. And while there are 5 Wednesdays in the month of August, so we were kind of debating, do we add another one in? We thought, let's just focus on these 4. So next week will be our final workshop in this series, and that will be on Black Breastfeeding Week. So that is a national level. Our focus this month, we've had 4 wonderful weeks. Our first week, we had an IBCLC, Anna speaking on the LGBTQIA experience of breastfeeding and chest feeding in that community. Last week, we had Pearl, who is speaking on Indigenous infant milk feeding traditions. This week we have Tiffany, we have Zoa, and we have Pakia speaking to us on the AAPI community. And next week we'll have Sierra Dillard, who will be speaking to us about breastfeeding and chest feeding from the Black community. So these are our 3 incredible speakers for today. They are all associated and connected to the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition. The email is in there, and I will also include that in the chat if you would like to reach out to them, learn more, learn how to get involved. There's a Facebook group you can also join, and then a link that I will also drop in the chat to learn more about them. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We cannot wait to get started. So I will let our speakers take it away from here.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. 안녕하세요. I'm just pulling up my slides here. Hopefully, everyone is doing well this afternoon. Awesome. Okay. Again, hello, 안녕하세요, everyone. Welcome to our session this afternoon. Just really excited to be part of this session today and also to celebrate August Breastfeeding Month with you all. Before we start our session here, I just want to quickly introduce myself and my co-speakers here. My name is Tiffany Bauya, and I am the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition co-coordinator. I also have Jolie, who is a WIC breastfeeding peer counselor, and she's also my partner in crime. She's also a co-coordinator over at HBC. And then we also have Pakia Yang. She is a WIC breastfeeding peer counselor. And so we will be your three speakers today. So in this session today, we hope that you all will get to learn a little bit more about the history and current breastfeeding beliefs and practices in the Hmong community. Secondly, the three of us will be sharing our own personal breastfeeding stories and experiences with you all. And lastly, we hope that you all will get to learn a little bit more about some of the culturally relevant breastfeeding resources and support that we have available for the Hmong families or Hmong individuals that you work with. And before I hand it over to Jo, I just want to preface by saying that, the stories that the three of us share today, again, they're our personal stories. And while we may share some similar experiences, we definitely do not speak for the entire Hmong community or Asian American community. And so with that, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hi, my name is Zoa. I'm one of the WIC peer breastfeeding counselor with Ramsey County, and also the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition co-coordinator with Tiffany. First of all, I want to let everyone know that these are not facts, but these are what we've learned and what we've received from our mother or elderly or friends that we're sharing with everyone today too. And first of all, this picture that Tiffany and the group we have decided to put on kind of shows the kind of like a journey that we had with breastfeeding, where the motherland is where we first started breastfeeding. But as we get closer to Thailand, saying that there was like war broke out, which is a secret war that many of us may not have known or have forgotten. But that war really affected many of our Hmong families and breastfeeding. As we move to Thailand, that has also condensed milk were made as available or a choice for a lot of our breastfeeding mothers. And as we moved to America, we totally just lost breastfeeding. And now we're trying to reclaim our breastfeeding breastfeeding back to our families. And then here's just a brief history of breastfeeding in the Hmong community. Back in the days after delivery, Hmong doula or elderly woman will remind the mother to remember to breastfeed your baby. That was just a word they say to the mom. Some doula or elderly woman may stay and give a quick lesson on how to breastfeed, but it is not a thorough instruction on how to breastfeed. And remind you, these young mothers are like 14, 15, 16 years old, and they have no experience in breastfeeding. And also the Hmong doula and elderly women have no knowledge of teaching or skills to teach them how to do it properly. So back then, there was no teaching of skin to skin, proper latching, and or positionings. They go by a 3 days rule to know if mom is able to produce breast milk. And this 3 days rules is from birth, they tell the mom or they teach the mom to put baby to the breast or to the nipple. And that was all it was. They didn't know whether there was proper latching. As soon as baby was just sucking on the nipple, that was good. And they say continue breastfeeding whenever baby is crying. until you have real breast milk coming out in. But they only go to 3 days instead of 4 to 7 days. They only have 3 days. So then after 3 days, or two days to 3 days, if the mom, the breastfeeding mom, feels like she is not producing any breast milk, she would then have her husband or the mother-in-law or a sister or someone in the household to run to the next door neighbor and then ask for a wet nurse or a mom that has been breastfeeding and have her come over to help breastfeed the baby for the mom. And also at that time, due to the war and also with General Vang Pao's and many of the veteran husbands, condensed milk were also brought from Thailand to Laos, where this was an option for them to feed their baby condensed milk. And when I asked my mom and the elderly woman about this session, they kind of mentioned that condensed milk in our language is called mi nhu, which meant cow's milk. So what they did with it was they boiled hot water and then put the condensed milk in there, but less condensed milk so that it's not as so sweet for the baby. But they would feed this to the baby, and there was an option. And this is before and after the war. These were made available for mothers, and they would feed the baby with spoon. So this is another option for moms who couldn't produce breast milk. And also they do understand that breastfeeding is baby's first food. So they do try their best to breastfeed baby or find ways to breastfeed baby. And also there were times when moms who couldn't breastfeed baby or during the war, when they were running away, they would feed baby rice water, which is like they would cook the rice and make it as soft as possible and then smush the rice up into like a congee like texture food and then add more water and it becomes a little bit thinner. And then they would feed that to their baby too. And that was one way of surviving at that time for many breastfeeding babies. And then currently in our breastfeeding home community, we now have visual teachings of how to latch in different breastfeeding positions to best meet the needs of baby and mom, better support system in the Western community, as well as outside family and friend support. And then to help achieve these exclusive breastfeeding for moms and babies, other resources were made available and taught to our mothers, such as hand expression, breast pump were also available, and also the hand pump, and also the purpose of skin to skin. It was better explained here in the Western culture. And also to an ability to overcome a lot of breastfeeding issues was the treatment for medical problems. And it was diagnosed by the doctors or by a professional that, you know, helped moms to overcome those terrible pains and were able to continue breastfeeding. And then here's my story. I am a mother of 6 children. The 3 on the left are my oldest daughters, and they were my 3 unsuccessful breastfeeding experiences. And the 3 superheroes on the right are my breastfeeding experiences that were very successful. And for me, I believe that breastfeeding for me was a rite of passage to motherhood. And I was very excited when I were able to breastfeed the last 3 babies. And I felt like I have reached motherhood and understood what it is to be a mom and how hard it was to be a breastfeeding mom too. And then here is my second daughter. Her name is Alicia, and I call this my melting pot baby. When she arrived, I moved here to Minnesota. And so I felt like I thought my husband has been a changed person and was able to be more, assimilated to the Western culture. But at that time, he still lacked spousal full support for me as a breastfeeding mom or spouse. He was still kind of like with like the older version of the Hmong man, where he told me that breastfeeding was my choice and therefore I have to breastfeed my baby alone, and whatever I need, he'll be there just to hold a baby, but he won't be there to breastfeed with me and baby. He, in his own way, I guess he did support me somewhat, but for me, maybe it's the postpartum blues too, making me feel like he didn't really support me with breastfeeding. I was over engorged. I had families criticizing me from left to right, saying that breastfeeding was not the path to go because only have 30 days for my maternity leave and I'm returning to work. And nobody is going to watch my baby because I'm breastfeeding. And I felt like maybe that was just what my mom was saying because she was not really supporting breastfeeding for me here in the United States. But I knew she breastfed back in Laos, but somehow here she told me that the economy was not made for breastfeeding, and so I didn't really listen to her. So I did it my own way where I just ignored her and just said, well, I told my mom, I said, well, you will be, watching my baby too, but most of the time it will be other caregivers. And also my dad was part of the caregiver. Once in a while, he'll watch my children. And so this child, I actually had my dad bottle feed my breast milk to him and I put it in a cooler and I would do like 6 bottles and then I'll tell my dad not to touch anything else and just to feed my baby, wipe any burping cloth or anything that was touched to the breast milk, just throw it into the cooler and I'll take care of it. I didn't expect my dad or the caregivers to even wash the bottles. I just said, just close in the cooler, lock it up. When I'm done with work, I'll bring it home and take care of it myself. And that was how it was for me and my baby. And somehow we kind of assimilated that a little bit into my father allowing me to bring breast milk to his house and also to other caregivers that was taking care of my daughter at that time. And my mom did remind me, and I put here 2 myths, and whether it's true or not, it's made for, it's in the back of our mind as a Hmong breastfeeding mom. Remember that it's not touching, it's drinking or inputting the breast milk in the mouth. Means that anyone that has stopped breastfeeding and or is older may get hit by lightning or lightning may strike that person. And that's one of our Hmong myths. And that's the number 1 myth. And also number 2 myth was 2 pregnant women in the same household or any pregnant woman visiting the pregnant woman that will be giving birth will make low breast milk supply. And that's our Hmong myth number 2. And I'm not so sure about that. Because at the time when I had this baby, I had my sister-in-law lived with us and she was also pregnant, but she gave birth first. So her baby came on the 15th of August and mine came on the 19th of August. And I don't really know if it's due to the myth or if it's just my body not producing enough breast milk at that time. So I did provide less breast milk for my baby too, but I just said that maybe it's because I didn't have the full support I was supposed to have for my baby at that time. So I will leave that up to everyone to decide. But for me, I think it's because of, lack of support for me and my baby, but we made it through and she did breastfeed for 2 to 3 months. And that's the end of my story. And I'm going to share this story back to Pokia. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Again, my name is Pakia Yang. I am a mother of 3 boys and currently pregnant with a baby girl, of which can be due any day now. I've been a breastfeeding peer counselor with WIC since February of this year, 2022. These are photos of my little family. My oldest is 11, middle child is 2, and my little one is 1 year old. My decision to breastfeed was a no-brainer as I've heard so many great benefits for the baby, such as antibodies to protect against sickness. It's been a hectic journey for me as I face, even until this day, criticism from families and friends. I like to share a bit of my journey and why being a breastfeeding advocate is so important to me. And again, as Tiffany mentioned before, I just wanted to make clear that my story is personal, does not reflect my community's experience as a whole. So these are my 3 children here as newborns. I had my first child at the age of 19. So at that time, I didn't have family friends who did like breastfeed aside from my stepmother. However, her decision to breastfeed was only because she did not have access to formula living in a third world country. The only resource I had were books about pregnancy and being a first-time mom, but nothing of that went into depth about breastfeeding. I did qualify for WIC at that time and was asked during my appointments if I wanted to breastfeed, but I was coerced by families and friends to say no, as it'll decrease the amount of formula cans I'll receive in my food package. I was highly discouraged by everyone around me, especially from my parents and ex-in-laws. They claim breastfed babies become too clingy to mothers, of which is seen as a bad thing. They would say things like, I won't be able to get back to work or school, and no one will want to help me babysit. And the formula was just much more convenient and quote unquote easier on everyone. So growing up within the home community, as Zola had mentioned before, there's a superstition about breast milk. It's considered this like very powerful liquid gold. So powerful that shamans use it to chase away demons and ghosts, of which also meant it is very dangerous to handle. So according to my parents, there was this old folklore myth about a young mother who lived back in her homeland. She had given birth and was home alone taking care of her newborn while her family was away farming. The young mother was prepping the food to feed the pigs and was not paying attention to her breast milk leaking through her shirt. A few drops got into the pig's food without her knowing. When she fed the pigs, her and the pigs were suddenly struck by lightning and died. So the belief is that breast milk cannot be consumed by anyone but the baby or like children under 5. And there really is like no proof or reasoning as of why. I did learn a little bit more about like the myth through Zoa, like as I became a breastfeeding peer counselor, but we can say that like that's like another story. We could save that for the end. But I was taught that, and it was just this constant fear migraine surrounding breast milk that got drilled into my head. So like as silly as it sounds, it just left me with this like thought in the back of my mind that I shouldn't dismiss it altogether, despite not ever having any scientific proof. And this was the main reason why many home elders that I knew of didn't support breastfeeding, especially living here now in the United States. Ease of access to formula and having WIC programs to provide you with free cans, breastfeeding was considered a thing of the past. I was left with 2 choices from families and friends. 1, don't breastfeed and receive help with the baby, or 2, breastfeed and don't get help with the baby. So ironic enough, I still didn't get the emotional or physical support from my in-laws and ex-husband at that time. It was a really great regret for me as a first-time mom not being able to make decisions based on what I wanted. After that, I made it my mission to get myself out of that toxic environment, and I held on to this hope that I will be able to breastfeed if I shall have any more children down the road. So I got remarried to my lovely husband now, who supports breastfeeding in all ways that he knows. It could be better, but it's a learning curve for everyone, including like for him. During my husband, he himself was breastfeed up until the age of 3. So during my WIC appointment, while pregnant with my second child, I was asked if I was interested in receiving breastfeeding support from their peer program. I didn't know such program existed, so of course I gladly agreed. I was contacted by my peer counselor, see her throughout my pregnancy. And to be very honest, I really didn't think much about the information she gave me, aside from me just wanting to try breastfeeding. I didn't bother to do much research on my own either. After giving birth to my second child, I spiraled down this lonely journey as I didn't know what I was doing. I had crackling, painful nipples, and just this crazy oversupply that caused like so much discouragement. And I found myself reaching to my peer counselor almost every day, whether it be just me crying to her or receiving tips to relieve engorgements and latching positions and whatnot. When she didn't have the answers for me, she would give me contact with a WIC lactation consultant. After 4 months of struggling, I was able to get it down while working full time and breastfed him for 10 months. When I had my third child, my supply wasn't as much as before, but again, with the help of my WIC counselor and lactation consultants, I was able to breastfeed him for 6 months. My goal originally for both of them were 1 year of breastfeeding, but I got pregnant shortly after, so the pregnancy hormone caused my supply to tank, and I had to switch them over to formula. So those 16 months of exclusive breastfeeding experience that I had with my 2 youngest would honestly not have been possible without the support I got from my WIC peer counselor. She not only provided me with the medical and facts and resources, but was like a friend who reassured and supported me emotionally throughout my hardships. In the midst of the pandemic, I had to make the difficult decision to leave my job of 6 years. Shortly after, my peer counselor reached out to me about possible opportunities to work with WIC. She stated that I'll be a perfect candidate to her to add onto their team as I'm passionate about breastfeeding. And here I am today. As I've mentioned before, I still face criticism from families and friends about my decision to breastfeed, and even more as I advocate for it. I've also come across so many Hmong mothers who dealt with the same lack of support as I did. That's why I felt so strongly about reaching out to my fellow Hmong community. I wanted to provide them with the same great information and support as my peer counselor had with me. And while the superstition about breast milk could just be a thing in the past, I've learned to respect others' belief about it. And, I think my whole goal is not to shame anyone about, their beliefs, but to better inform families to make their decisions based on scientific facts and personal choices. I get asked a lot about what the hardest part about breastfeeding is. Was it the struggle with latching, sleepless nights, pumping every 2, 3 hours, or engorgement? Um, but I can honestly say no to all those, as those struggles all had solutions. I believe that the hardest part was the criticism and judgments I faced from friends, family, and my community. Uh, the peer program that WIC offer is one of the many resources that can be life-changing to families. Having met awesome advocates such as Zoa and Tiffany along the way has opened up my experiences and passion about breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is more than just a form of feeding. It is not a lifestyle change, but a public health issue. And I'm so glad to be a part of it. Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany to share her story now.
Thank you, Fakia and Shoa, for sharing. So now it's my turn. Again, my name is Tiffany Bauya, and this is my breastfeeding story. So I found out that I was pregnant in February of 2020. And so this is actually right before the pandemic was when I found out. And then, of course, my whole pregnancy was during the pandemic and during like the whole a statewide like shutdown. I forget what it's called. But during this time of quarantine and isolation, I spent time like other expectant people, moms, parents, kind of just doing some research and learning about what to expect during my pregnancy, during labor and delivery, and then also postpartum. And one area and topic that I felt like I had in the books and kind of knew a lot about was breastfeeding. And I credit my involvement with the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition and with our partners as well too, and why I'm so passionate about this topic. And so that being said, early on in my pregnancy, I knew that I wanted to breastfeed. And so that being said, I made the plan to breastfeed, and I spent the rest of my pregnancy, of course, kind of just trying to enjoy my pregnancy, but then also reaching out to family, friends, and letting my partner know that I had a plan to breastfeed. And so my goal was to build my breastfeeding support group early on. Then in the fall of 2020, I had my boy Nuchiev. You can see his baby picture. I think he was like probably like 30 minutes old in that picture. But my delivery experience is not so great, and it was definitely not what I expected it to be. Long story short, I had onset, I believe I had onset preeclampsia. I had a really healthy pregnancy as well too. But getting that diagnosis and having to also undergo an emergency C-section really changed the course of my birth plan. And so that being said, Nu and we were separated for what I felt like was eternity, but my husband was like, no, it was just 30 minutes. But I didn't get to experience that skin-to-skin contact with him or initiate breastfeeding right away, which I was really a little bit disappointed about. But once we were moved to our private room, I then started to try to initiate breastfeeding. And let's just say all the information that I knew about breastfeeding before kind of just went out the window. And I was definitely not prepared for the actual work. I had a lot of concerns about my milk supply. Um, and then also my baby had some challenges with latching on to my nipple. And so that was very discouraging for me as well too. The first few days that I was still recovering at the hospital. However, I do want to credit my the nurse who helped take care of me. She was really supportive, and the IBCLC, my IBCLC who came to visit me as well too. They were both very supportive and provided great guidance, and also reassured that, hey, encouraging me to continue breastfeeding and to pump to help build my supply. And so they also gave me a lot of hope and reassurance. And then after, I believe, 4 days, I went home. And I think in that period, I felt extremely overwhelmed with nursing, on top of just trying to recover from a very traumatic delivery experience. My milk, thankfully, was starting to come in, but I guess I didn't know how to like position my baby. And again, he also had some challenges with latching as well too, so I became very engorged, and that was a very painful experience, so it made me want to give up. And so in this period, I felt very lonely. Um, Even though I had my support system, right, I still felt very lonely because, as Joa and Pakia was saying earlier, sometimes the judgment and criticism of other folks that really gets to you. And so, yeah, I just felt really lonely in the very early stages of postpartum for me. However, my husband and a few other folks in my support group did reach out and continue to cheer me on. And I think it was their words of encouragement that really helped pull me through in my journey. I also think that what really helped me succeed within the following weeks, months, and now I can't believe I'm saying this, but almost 2 years of my breastfeeding journey was just really setting intentional and realistic breastfeeding goals for myself. I was telling Pakia and Joa the other day that some of my goals like consisted of like breastfeeding for 1 week and then evaluating how that went, checking out like how I can improve, what I can continue trying, and then setting another goal for 1 month. And then once I reach that 1 month goal, kind of evaluating that experience again, and then continue to pursue like in 3 month increments, like kind of just going back and evaluating how I was doing. And then also, of course, celebrating myself as well too, because my baby was growing and I was seeing that clearly. And I think lastly, I think just my faith and prayers, individual prayers, and also others praying for me. I felt like that also really gave me hope and the will to press forward in times of loneliness and hardship during this journey. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I had a support system that I kind of put together early on. And I cannot conclude my story without, sharing who my support system, who they were. Of course, my husband, right? He was great, but also like, my husband, son, and I, we still live with my in-laws. And so like my father-in-law, he is and my mother-in-law, they are literally like secondary, would be secondary. If Tuhu and my husband and I were not there, both my in-laws would be present to help take care of my son, and they were also very supportive of my breastfeeding decision. And then of course my parents as well too, who we don't live with, but of course they always want to see Nuchia, and they would help with giving him the bottle, or just taking care of him while I needed my time of rest as well too. And then my husband and I, we both come from very large families, and so we have many brothers and sisters, and so they're always willing to step up and help take care of our son as well too. And so we're very blessed to have such a great support system on in this journey. And so that was my story, and those are our 3 stories. And as you know, Pakia and Joa mentioned, we're all just very passionate about breastfeeding, because I feel like, you know, we've been through kind of the challenges and we have our own experiences. And we know that our Hmong sisters and aunties, they may also be experiencing similar situations, or may not have that support. And so we definitely want to be there to advocate and to also provide resources and support for them in our community. And so that's why it's so important. I always tell folks it's so important to have, for us at least, a cultural breastfeeding coalition as well too, where if we don't provide resources, at least we provide that support where we can come and talk about some our experiences together. And so with that being said, with the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition, over the last couple of years, we have developed a few resources with partnerships with like the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. And I know MDH was also involved and WIC were also involved in a lot of our early work as well too. And continue to be very supportive of us. But we've developed some resources such as like breastfeeding support videos for new and expecting moms, for their partners as well as the elders, on how to like handle breast milk, and kind of just providing some of the stories as well too. And then we also have, I believe we started this probably like 2 years ago, where we started some Facebook Live events where we would hold conversations about certain topics like having a baby during COVID, and then also postpartum depression. Having those conversations online on our Facebook page as well too. And those usually I feel like we usually have a pretty good turnout as well too, and engagement with our community. And then I know Joa also worked with, what's it, Ramsey County on Buniami Bahwa, which is kind of like a, it's like, I don't know how to translate that in English. But we have that available too. And it's kind of like a musical poetry. And a lot of our elders listen to these musical poetries, these bahwas. And so we have that available for them to also listen to and learn from. And then recently we also put together an environmental scan on breastfeeding in the Twin Cities Hmong community. And this was through funding with NACHO. And so we have that report out. And so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about our resources or utilizing them, feel free to check out our Facebook page. And I think the videos are also uploaded on the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition YouTube page. I've included here a QR code. Feel free to scan it. And it leads to the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition webpage. Earlier this year, we worked with, I believe, Pearl, who was contracted with NBC to get all of our resources up on the NBC website. And so also feel free to check that out as well too. That's another place where our resources should be located. And then I do want to add a quick tidbit as well too. So earlier I mentioned that we had a report that was done with funding from NACHO. And with the findings from that NACHO report, we actually pulled the findings and wanted to create this like social media campaign and put it out on Facebook. And our first post from this social media campaign will actually be posted tomorrow. And it's kind of just like an introductory to August breastfeeding month, even though we're like deep mid into the month. We want to share that with our community. And then next week we have 4 different posts that we'll also be putting up on our Facebook for our community to engage with. And it'll touch on areas like debunking myths in our community, as well as sharing some testimonials. And then also we had our graphic artist also recreate like a breastfeeding positions, like sort of graphic. It's really cool. And then lastly, we also just have like positive affirmations that we hope that our community members can kind of be like an action item for our community members to share and also tag and with their family members. But this social media campaign was funded through Health Connect One, in which we are part of their second cohort of the First Food Equity project. And we're just really excited to have this out in our community and for everyone to engage with. And so now I'll hand it over to either Pakia or Joa.
Okay, so I'm pretty new to the WIC peer program. I still feel like I'm new. And I see that Erin and Anna is here too, though they're our lactation consultants. So if Eric and Anna, if you guys have anything to add as far as the resources for the Ramsey County community, do feel free to spam the chat box. But so for mothers who are interested in breastfeeding support, they can definitely ask for our peer counselor programs during their next WIC appointment. And I put down, it's not here, but I think it's in the chat, like a peer program map of Minnesota to see if they have that program within their county. And then for Ramsey County, we have a lactation lounge every second Tuesday of the month. And I have the flyers here, and we'll be doing it at Highland Park Library. So I do look forward to seeing mothers come there for support for breastfeeding, chest feeding, and pumping. So I don't know if you guys, or if you have anything else to add on to it too.
Awesome.
I'll give a little background clap on behalf of everyone for sharing those incredible stories and perspectives and resources. Thank you so much, all 3 of you. I'll open it up. If folks want to unmute themselves, feel free. If anyone wants to post some questions directly into the chat box, feel free to do that. And I have some questions that I can bring up to kind of percolate some thinking if folks don't have questions, but I'll give space for some wonderings. A wondering I had, and again, if anyone has anything that pops in your mind, please feel free to unmute and ask. So next week, you said next week is the week you're sharing a little bit more about debunking those myths that you had kind of that you had brought up, Zoa, in the beginning. And I'm curious, is that something that you find or you've experienced to be kind of a common factor in folks who are coming to see you through WIC, the other breastfeeding parents? Is that pretty common throughout the Hmong community, that folks are still working through, like how to kind of have those conversations with family members, or how to kind of work through their own internal stigma or biases or superstitions about that? Can you just speak on that a little bit? And it's also okay to say, tune in next week if you want to kind of wait and share that next week.
Thanks, Zora. It is, yes, with a lot of our breastfeeding moms, they do mention it. And that's one small challenge is that breastfeeding moms that would say, and they would do that because we don't really know if it did happen or it didn't happen, but it was a myth or a curse, and it has been there for generations after generations. So we do have to explain to them how to handle safe handling of breast milk. And that was one of the videos that we had for the that Tiffany was saying that on our posting with NBC, how to handle breast milk. and how to, and I think we had that in English and Hmong, that video. So yes, I do. And I don't know if Paukia, if you want to chime in any other things from your experiences too.
I think as far as from what my experiences working with clients, the belief still hangs on onto a lot of mothers or families who either like the elders or the ones who just came here to United States like maybe for like a couple years. They still hold on to that thought, and I think that's where a lot of them don't get the support that they want. But as far as like within like, I'm kind of like, well, I would consider like the millennial, generation. A lot of them do like, elders to talk to them about it, but they're like, they heard about it, but they're not too what is it? Their belief isn't really there anymore. So it doesn't quite really matter. But I think it always comes down to, and I think I've talked to like Zoe about it. It's always like every time you talk about breastfeeding to them, they always go, it's a thing in the past. Like we do that back in our home country, but here, United States, where freedom of choice and whatever, and you have all these resources for formula, and they're like, we don't do that anymore. That's pretty much what they said. And it's ironic to me that when I do ask them, like, hey, do you know the benefits of breastfeeding? It's not just for you, it's also, I mean, not just for the child, but it's also for you too. And it really helped open their eyes a bit of like, oh wow, I didn't know that there was all those health benefits that came with it too. So I guess I do experience that. That is definitely something that we kind of struggle in between because they're so set in stone and they're like, we don't do this anymore, and then you shouldn't advocate for it anymore because again, it's kind of like formula is considered to them like a luxury item for them right now. And breastfeeding is kind of like, you only do it if you don't have access to formula or you don't have the money for it. But other than that, yeah, those challenges, I still run into it here and there. Not much with the younger generation, but definitely with the ones who just freshly came here from, Laos or Thailand to here in America, or those who still hold on to those spiritual beliefs.
And then I can also quickly touch base on our post for next week. So I really wish that we had, so we were very limited in funding. Still very grateful for the amount of funding that we received, but we were only able to create 3 posts on these myths. And so unfortunately, we didn't get to touch much on like these like folklores or like these like the lightning myth and stuff like that, but we touched on myths like, oh, if my mom, if I have smaller breasts, I won't be able to produce as much milk. And so that's also a very a concern in our community. And I've also heard that. I'm not a WIC peer counselor, but I've heard that from like anecdotally from like cousins and my moms and aunties as well too. And so that's kind of where we're headed with like our myths and post next week.
So I just wanted to shine in and share in something too, like when someone's mentioning that I think the myth kind of goes around, consuming. And then later on, I just remember like even my dad telling me like, and then some of the aunts telling me if you cannot share a spoon with a breastfed baby. And so they were like, and then my dad would be so upset when like he knows that because my sister, she went down the breastfeeding route too. My dad's like, I can't kiss my grandchild because you're breastfeeding and that's dangerous and I don't want to get struck by lightning and stuff like that. So there's just like, I just wanted to kind of throw that in, like that's how strongly that they still hold on to it, that they feel that they can't do these certain things with their grandchildren or breastfed babies.
Thank you all for speaking on that. Yeah, and I'm so curious to tune in next week and learn a little bit more about that. And I'm hearing that there's like very specific, these myths that are really specific to the Hmong community, and then there's also this concern or equating small breasts to low or no milk supply, which is specific to the Hmong community, and also, you know, specific to just the broader community of small breasted people who are hoping to breast or chest feed. And so, yeah, I think that there's so much work to do in this on a small scale, and then also in this broader scale of just debunking these myths, or, you know, not just debunking, because, you know, the lactation consultants in the room can say that, yes, sometimes there can be small amount of breast tissue which can contribute to small or low milk supply, but that's also not necessarily the case. And I think that just speaks to this fact that there's a need for so much more education, so much more support. And that's, you know, a little plug for MBC at the end of September is actually doing another presentation workshop on prenatal education and the power of prenatal education, and the need for some more and better education, because, you know, it's not just these communities that are having these misunderstandings or these confusions or these wonderings. It's kind of this broader community of people who are having babies and then feeding their babies. There's so much education out there that we can be sharing, and we can all be learning from each other. And I have another wondering too about kind of, it's connected to the myths that you brought up, but do you find that there's a lot of whether it's in peer support communities or settings, or if it's just in the, you know, conversations with family members, but is there any support or resources for partners learning a little bit more and being involved and engaged in supporting breastfeeding? You know, a lot of you shared kind of having those experiences directly with having a partner who was not quite sure how to participate, but just didn't have that resources or the vocabulary to help either emotionally support or physically support. So I'm just wondering if there's any community or conversations or resources out there that is within the community to provide that for partners of people breastfeeding.
Go ahead, Pachi.
Yeah, no, it's like, I don't, that's a really good idea. That's a really good idea, though. Not that I know of.
I know, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen one out there for our community, how the spouse can support, but I have been sharing WIC spouse support with the families I've worked with, and that was just like all that I had. And then also from my experience and letting moms know that even though I did say my husband didn't support me, in his eyes, he supported me on my 30 days by watching the baby. Didn't do anything, but he watched the baby, and that was his support. And even if I speak of this, like he didn't support me, he still said, oh yes, I did. I was there to watch the baby. I didn't do much, but I did watch the baby, and that was my support for you. So in their own way, they support. But I think over time, my husband actually, when we had our last baby, I did see like a 20% increase in supporting me with breastfeeding. But with the first 3, 4, and 5, it was just kind of like, for him, it was ashamed. He viewed it as a shameful event with if I was outside breastfeeding. But I didn't just flip and have my breast out there. It was like covered too, but the baby was so big, the arms and legs, and he's just like, this is so embarrassing. Like when we went to eat out at a restaurant, he was saying, stop breastfeeding the baby. You're just feed him formula. It's easier. And I said, no, I'll just calm him down. And because I know it's a comfort that he just didn't want to be in that environment. And so I just calmed him down and start giving him real food to eat. And he was calmed down. But my husband was just not liking the fact that he was being embarrassed while I was trying to breastfeed. And I think that was the biggest thing for him. And he didn't like it when I was around breastfeeding with him. So, I mean, but he did help, like he said. But I'll have Pokia and Tiffany speak on their behalf too.
I think we do have one resource, and I think it's part of those breastfeeding support videos that I mentioned earlier that you can find on the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition YouTube page, as well as on the website. I think we have one video where we kind of just like talked about like how partners can help their partners who are breastfeeding, so like in ways like doing the laundry or letting their partner rest, and you taking care of baby for the meantime, in the meantime, and then also like how to like warm up um, milk as well too. And so, and there's I think we have one video, and so definitely check out that list on on YouTube as well as on the NBC website.
I do. I think I must have, now that you mentioned it to me, I think I came across that video too. I should have shown it to my husband instead of watching it by myself. But
Yes,
yeah.
Mhm.
That's definitely something great too. I think that we can definitely expand on. I think like me and Zoe, we were every time we're done with like our meetings, we would like sit and talk about different ways that we can kind of get the more community involved. That's what's so important to us. Like when we talk about like a mother having like, and even our personal story about being super lonely and not having that kind of support. Our spouse doesn't, like I said, I've had many times where I breastfeed and my friends will be like, oh, I want to help you, but then, you decide to breastfeed, so I can't help you soothe your baby. And it's like, well, you could, but it's like, it's just one of those, but I think it's something definitely to think more about. And I remember Zoe, like, this is just something that me and Zoe were like, just kind of touching brief on, like, maybe like down the road we can have like little community events and get together where, because we definitely want to bring them together and show them, it's more than just, yes, the mom provides the milk, but everybody else can also, hands on. And I think one of the important things that, at least I'm sure Zola do it too, what I would ask my clients, and I would be like, who's your support system? Like, have you talked to them about, what ways they can help you with as far as breastfeeding? And a lot of them be like, oh, my husband supports me. And I'm like, but then they don't actually go into this. Like, he just agrees. So they think that him saying, or like just anybody around them going, yeah, you can breastfeed. Like, I don't mind. They think that that's like, oh, that's support. Like, it's more than just that mental, that it's more than just that mental support too, like emotionally and physically, like be there to help them, handle chores when they can't. So I think it's definitely something to think about. And it's definitely something that me as well, we're like, we actually talk about, like, what can we do to kind of bring at least elders to understand more about it, and what ways can we involve the husband. And that's why it's like, it's important. Well, me as well as like, if we have a community, we can invite, like, bring your husbands or bring your families and stuff like that, because it literally takes a village to raise a child, as they say, so that's definitely something that I feel like we can definitely work on and include it into like our future projects.
Thank you so much, all of you, for speaking on that and for being with us today. We've come to the end of our wonderful workshop. So we'll wrap this up by just saying thank you to everyone tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or you're watching this later on. Thank you for showing up and supporting Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition, supporting all of the people doing incredible work, for showing up for our wonderful speakers today. And thank you to Zoa and Pakia and Tiffany for being here and just having such wonderful perspectives and really important knowledge and information that you're able and willing to share with the broader community. And I thank you to Carrie. I saw that you put that link in for YouTube. That is directly the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition's YouTube video on partner and spousal support. And there's a link in there. Kim reminded me that the Breastfeeding Coalition is looking for some board members. So if you are passionate about, curious about, interested in things, all things breastfeeding and chest feeding and advocacy, the link right there is to learn a little bit more about that board position. So I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your Wednesday, rest of your week. Thank you so much again for our wonderful speakers. Pakia, best of luck to this new little babe that will be joining your family soon. Can't wait to keep tabs on her and hear how everything is going with that. So thank you everyone again, be well. And if you are able to tune in next Wednesday, we'll be back Wednesday at noon next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.